welcome to the show. It's really great to have you on. I'm super excited to talk to you about Tal and about blockchain. Very, very exciting topics that people are interested in. So really, thank you for making the time and coming on.
My pleasure, Rena. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So catch listeners up. Talk to us about how you got to Tal, how you have navigated your career thus far and transition to becoming an executive, and then how you got to Tal specifically.
Well, my background, for as long as I can remember, has been in the technology sector. I worked, obviously I'm an Australian, and have worked in the pre-press technology area in Australia for a decade, running the Asia Pacific region. I've got an MBA. I have a specific view on MBAs, actually, which might be interesting.
Yeah.
I've over my career worked with many people that have undertaken MBA programs, and I find that those that have studied after they have spent time in the workforce tend to have a different perspective on how to apply the knowledge that comes through the program. And maybe I'm biased because I'm one of those, but I did my first degree was in finance, and for a period of my time I did work in financial roles, but that wasn't what excited me. Management, leadership, technology was the thing that drove me more than anything else. And then when I was working in the online sector in Australia in gaming, was when I did my MBA, and obviously you can imagine a finance degree, you focus on a lot of the financial topics and some legal. I particularly selected legal and marketing type subjects in my MBA program, but my focus was international business because that was the arena that I was starting to move into at the time, and it was obviously I wanted to make the program relevant to my career. But I did spend 10 years in online gaming in Australia. Then I moved to the UK, spent some time in the UK, then moved to Asia in the Philippines, all associated with online gaming. So roughly 14, 16 years of my life was in that online arena. So, high volumes of transaction processing where, mission critical applications, uptime was paramount. The reliability of transaction processing was critical. That was where I really cut my teeth, and I guess that's what has sort of crafted the way I think today. But in terms of blockchain and Bitcoin, it was through connections that I had and relationships that I had as early back as 2007, 2008, where I first became aware of blockchain technology and in particular Bitcoin. And of course, 2007, 2008, Bitcoin wasn't released at that stage. The white paper was only released in October 2008, and Bitcoin was launched in January 2009. But I had, and I'm not going to go into the details because I'll get trolled and attacked from all directions of the planet, because this is an industry that is characterized by incredible troll armies and incredibly polarized views on what is right and what is wrong with every blockchain technology on the planet. And I've never seen anything like it in my working career, and probably never will in the future. But yes, I was aware of the creation of Bitcoin, and I must admit, back in those days, what I saw and what I talked to people about, I had the view that it was technology that was going nowhere. Now, one of the things about me, and people that have worked with me over the years will know, is that I form opinions very quickly, but I do have the ability to change my views on things if I am in the possession of information that makes it sensible to do so. So I've done that when it comes to Bitcoin and blockchain. Now, back in 2008, 2009, I wasn't thinking about blockchain so much. I was more forming my views on Bitcoin as an application currency, and I moved from Australia to the UK in 2010, I think late 2010, and I had no communication with anyone about Bitcoin or blockchain technology for a few years. But I became reacquainted in late 2014. And it was at that point that, it wasn't Bitcoin, it wasn't the value of Bitcoin, it wasn't what the coins were trading at. It was the greater understanding that I had at that time for the underlying technology.
Mm-hmm.
And over the next few years, as I started to study and understand the mechanics of Bitcoin and its blockchain more, I started reading more and more opinion pieces from people that was, tried to separate the two. Yes, you either believed in Bitcoin or you believed in blockchain, but there were a number of people that wanted to tear it apart and say, Bitcoin's rubbish, but the blockchain is great. But the reality is, you can't separate them. You can't. One doesn't exist without the other. Now, I'll talk about the Bitcoin blockchain primarily here, and I know there are other blockchain technologies in the world that have emerged over the years. I have a particular personal impression around private chains, which I don't rate terribly highly. I'm more an advocate for public blockchains.
So talk to us about the difference between public and private blockchains for people that don't know.
Well, private blockchains are permissioned, which means that there is somebody or some entity that controls that chain. And in my mind, that makes them no different to a distributed database. They don't have the same characteristics that a public blockchain does, which is permissionless. So I was an advocate for the changes that occurred in BTC world when BCH forked and the Bitcoin Cash chain was created, and that the reason for that was that I've always been an advocate for large blocks and large volume transaction processing on chain, and of course, subsequent to that, we have what was known as the hash wars that occurred in the industry, where BSV or Bitcoin SV split from separated from Bitcoin Cash. So we have the three main Bitcoin variants there: BTC, BCH, and BSV. Obviously, the work that I've been doing has been focused around BSV. particularly in recent times. It hasn't always been that way. I was a founder of nChain, a, a, a blockchain research and development group in London, and we set that business up began setting it up in roughly around June 2015. We started hiring people in London in around October 2015. We had an office in London secured by the end of the year, and it was fitted out in 2016. I spent 2016, 2017 in London almost full time as CEO of nChain, and subsequently stepped aside, and that business has grown incredibly. I mean, back in 2016, we had roughly 55, 60 people in the organization, of which 35 were PhDs who were doing pure research in blockchain technologies, and we were filing patent applications around blockchain technologies. And as the industry is, people like to attack what they don't understand fully, and we were accused of being, smoke and mirrors organization. You couldn't possibly hire 35 PhDs in central London without anyone knowing about it. Well, we did. You couldn't possibly have an office in central London with 55 people working in it without anybody knowing about it. Well, we did. And we were filing patent applications. And of course, then we were accused of being patent trolls, which is the furthest from the truth that you could possibly get. And nChain today is, a 200-300 person company that I'm chairman of. I'm not actively involved in the business, but I am on the boards and I am chairman. And it has filed well over 1,000 patent applications, and it's in the process of developing some very interesting and powerful technologies around platforms that operate on or connect to the blockchain, enabling businesses to be able to transact and store data and become innovative and disruptive. I mean, this is what blockchain technology was all about. I mean, there's been dozens of books and opinion pieces written at various stages, particularly in the first 5 years, around the disruptive and innovative nature of blockchain.
Absolutely.
And this is where the not so smart people wanted to separate Bitcoin from the blockchain because they were focused on the business application of using blockchain. And the promise was, and the promise still is, that the blockchain will create disruption. It will create new industry sectors. It will create new ways for businesses to operate, more efficient ways for them to operate, and the list goes on. There are consulting businesses and associations and forums that devote all their time and effort to exploring the wide avenue, range of use cases for blockchain technology. But the problem is, Rena, there have been changes made to Bitcoin started all this. So now we have deviations from the original design that was articulated in Satoshi's white paper in 2008. And each one of those deviations from the protocol design has caused weaknesses and restrictions in the way that you can use that chain. to the point, I look at BTC trading today at the $55,000, $65,000 range, and I have no problems with that at all. If that's what individuals and investors, that's where they want to put their money, and they want to speculate on store of value, store of gold, and the restrictive um, avenue of use cases. That's fine with me. I don't run around abusing them and attacking them online. That's their prerogative. What I'm focused on is high volume transaction processing for businesses at small transactional costs, because that was what, in my opinion, that was what the blockchain technology promised when it was created, invented, and released. And that's where I still think the real future value generally of blockchain technology is for the world. Now, we have a lot of other variants of blockchain in various guises that have emerged over the years, and the reason I am focused on BSV is because it works. It was the original protocol design. That protocol design has been proven to work. Tal, the company that I'll talk about more in a second or two, we have been involved in mining and proving the capabilities of blocks on the BSV network 3 or 4 times over the last 12 months. There's been large and larger blocks mined on the network that Tal has actually been lucky enough to mine. I mean, we're not the only miner on the network, but we do focus on tuning and building our infrastructure to be able to handle high volumes. A couple of these large blocks, we've known about the activities on the network and the volume of transactions in advance. The latest one, though, we had no idea. It took us completely by surprise, and we mined a 638 megabyte block, and that was only a week or two ago.
Saw that.
Yeah, that
breaking world records always gets some good press.
Well, the interesting thing with that, as I said, it was on a weekend. I think it was on a weekend, going into a Friday night, depending on where you are in the world. But we weren't aware of the activity that was being conducted that caused those transactions to be on the blockchain, and we were lucky enough to mine the block. But more importantly, it proved to me, and it proved to our organisation, that the work that we've been doing over the last 12 months or so in designing our infrastructure and our software and our capabilities is rock solid. And we did it without, any advance notice. So that was the most pleasing thing. But the interesting thing about that particular block is that the previous blocks of 100, 200, 300 megabytes that have been mined have been comprised of like 1.1, 1.4 million transactions, so high volumes of small transactions, mainly associated with transfers, etc., etc. This block, what surprised me when I looked at the data associated with the block, it only had, 2,500 transactions. And that was because it was made up of data files, so images and streaming media. Now, this is where we've been talking about for quite some time now, about the future use cases of the blockchain. So it's not just a payment mechanism, transferring payments from A to B. you can store and transfer data files, and this is an area where TAL will be spending, or is already, but will be spending quite a bit of our focus, is around management of data on the blockchain, storing, archiving, retrieving, indexing, etc., etc. In much the same way, we've said it in our media around our recent capital raise, which was highly successful, which closed last week. We very much see part, not all, but part of our future is in providing services on the blockchain similar to what Amazon does with AWS
Right.
in the internet world.
Before you get started with that, let me ask you something, because you mentioned this about how you feel like, blockchain as it was intended in the original white paper in 2008, and that it's been deviated from that a little bit. Do you feel like, and also, sorry, it feels like it comes across that you feel like some people have been kind of usurping the power of blockchain and Bitcoin, and kind of using it for different reasons than it was originally intended, and it sounds like too much to the dismay and to the disadvantage of the industry. How do you feel like you wish that it would have stayed truer to that message, if you do feel that way?
Well, I certainly do wish that Bitcoin BTC had stayed true to the original design, but I wouldn't say that they've usurped the power, because the power of what was originally designed exists today in BSV.
Right.
What I think is sad is that the ability of the blockchain to be used to transform industries, create new industry sectors, transform business, provide the innovation and the disruption that has been talked about for quite some time, could have been more powerful, could have been more evident, and could have been 5 years ago rather than today.
And do you feel like we're missing out on that, or we're just now catching up and it just could have been 5 years earlier?
No, it could have been 5 years earlier, but were we ready for it? I think the next 5 years will answer that question. We saw the same thing with the internet, Rena. I'm lucky enough, old enough, to have lived through some very interesting technology changes.
Mm-hmm.
The internet, I lived through the beginnings of the internet. I was lucky enough to be working in an industry that embraced the internet when it was first arrived on the scene. I saw the mistakes that a lot of companies and people made. I saw the .com boom and bust. I saw the same characteristics about, we will do this and we will become instant millionaires.
Right.
And it's no surprise to me, I guess, to see the same thing happening or similar things happening today in this, crypto blockchain era.
Well, look, at any burgeoning industry, I think, especially the first movers that make that kind of big money, and then they tout it as something that is approachable by anyone. And especially now we're seeing, companies getting into it. I think even I remember like a few years ago that people were talking about Bitcoin as even blockchain as, unavoidable, and it's going to be the next big thing. And people were much more hesitant. And I think now that it's being proven out in real time, I think people are a lot more receptive to it coming on board, which is reflected in the price. But I think what's interesting in what you say is even kind of you coming around from before you were at nChain, then when you were at nChain, and now with your position at TAL, it sounds like you've also kind of had this arc where you've, kind of evolved in terms of applying blockchain and Bitcoin to the marketplace. Like, for instance, preferring BSV. Do you feel like the time that we've had has sharpened, as you said, you had many PhDs on staff. Do you think it's sharpened all those minds that are paying attention to blockchain and Bitcoin in the right way?
Yeah, I do. I mean, this technology has created a whole new industry.
Right.
This technology has created jobs um, that didn't exist before. This technology has created learning experiences for very talented and bright people. And, you know, we're only 1% of the way there. What's going to happen over the next 5 to 15 years, uh, I think, will be mind blowing in many ways as the technology is embraced. I mean, I've seen research pieces um, by prominent research firms that talk about um, the growth that's going to occur in the Internet of Things arena, in uh, in financial services, in healthcare, in supply chain. I mean, uh, all these applications are going. All this investment is going to be driven by investment in blockchain. Now, we'll go back to what I said earlier. There are a number of coins, chains, technology around the place, and it's in my mind very much horses for courses. Some of these things, many of them, all of them, will work at various levels of intensity, throughput, and so on and so forth. But there is only, in my mind, there is only one technology available today that is enterprise grade, proven to be enterprise grade, at the throughput levels and the fractions of a cent per transaction fee level, and that's BSV. And that's why the companies that I'm involved with are totally committed to this technology.
Was the choice to go from nChain to Tal was part of that kind of pursuing that strategy even more, or did it have more to do with kind of what had happened with nChain? It was just time to move on, and Tal was the natural kind of
No,
next step.
I didn't move on. I see nChain and Tal as being synergistic with one another. I mean, I reorganized my thoughts, admitted my mistakes of 2008, 2009, and I did that in late 14, early 15. Um, Became very energized around the possibilities for this technology because I had lived through the .com internet era, because I had seen how mobile telephony and mobile telecom technology also changed businesses and the way people interact with one another. I saw the same possibilities for this blockchain Bitcoin technology. Very few people get to live through these sorts of disruptive, innovative cycles more than once in their life. And that's why most people that I was working with back in the when the internet arrived are retired now.
Right. Right.
I'm not, and I still feel like I'm 30 years of age, 25, 30 years of age. I approach every day like that. I don't take holidays. I work long hours, and I don't even think about it. It's just the vibrancy of this industry and the people that I work with. But I stepped back from nChain and nChain's research and development activities in, I'm going to say late 2016, partially, and then more so in 2017, because I got more involved in mining. And I set up mining operations on 2 or 3 fronts, and managed some, very significant mining operations for a couple of years. And it was during that period that I started to think about supply chains, because having worked in online gaming, one of the concerns that you always have is, your supply chain, licensing technology versus owning technology. And I started to think about the fact that I needed an alternate to the supply chains for hashing machines that I had, because, what would happen if I lost part of my supply chain, and what impact that would have on my hashing or mining businesses. So I started to look around and think of ways that I could mitigate that risk. And I was put in touch with a group that was doing some ASIC chip development in South Korea, and that's how I became aware of the public shell that was rebranded as TAL eventually. I made a personal investment, and some colleagues of mine made an investment into the public company, and became a director. And then, bit by bit, we started to think about where the future of this was going. And, things happen in the industry generally that start to refocus your thoughts, and you have different, changes in thought processes over time. And we sat back and conceived what TAL is today, and rebranded the original shell into TAL, and I'm so pleased we did. So I see TAL and nChain. I said before, I'm still on the board of the nChain companies, and I'm chairman. Obviously, I'm on the TAL board, and I'm chairman. But in October last year, I stepped in as CEO of TAL. And I made a commitment at that time that I would lead the company for a period of time, and I'm pleased I did. It's been rewarding for me so far. Every day is a challenge, and every day presents new opportunities. But I love it. And TAL processes transactions onto the blockchain. TAL is a transaction processor, as opposed to a block miner. But of course, you need to mine blocks to be able to pack them with transactions and process them. But TAL's vision is that, whether it's in 2.5 years or 6.5 years, as the block rewards halve and halve again, the mining industry needs to change. It needs to change from being a block subsidy reward earner to a transaction processor. And if you don't have the infrastructure and the technology capabilities to move large volumes of transactions, then you're going to have to go through an adjustment. And TAL is the world's leader in this area. We are designing our capabilities, and I've mentioned the large blocks. We know that it works. We are designing our capabilities so that we can process transactions for enterprise-grade clients at high volumes and at low cost. And one of the capabilities that we have is that we're able to enter into contracts with enterprise customers and clients in fiat, which means that if you're a business that wants to take full advantage of the capabilities of blockchain technology to give yourself a competitive advantage, to create a new business, to be disruptive, whatever it may be, you don't have to lay yourself open to the movements in the value of the digital token that is associated with BSV or with the blockchain. And you can enter into contracts based in fiat, which gives you and your customers absolute certainty on what your cost models are going to be. So we've spent a lot of time developing those capabilities and the portals to engage and the APIs to engage with business and manage data as well, not just transactions, but data. And we know that we're moving into the realm of data storage and data management on chain and off chain. But end chain, on the other hand, provides all of the platform and platform modules for a business to be able to plug in, not disrupt, and not have to concern themselves with re-engineering all of their internal and existing systems, but to be able to connect to the blockchain. So they're two businesses that interact like this to provide an end-to-end solution for clients.
So let me ask you a question, because you mentioned the importance of maintaining the supply chain. And, you know, if you're going to be successful in this field, probably any disruptive field, really, you really need to have a handle on the compliance aspect of the business, which I think speaks to that very much. Do you feel like having a handle on those things is what allows you to push to the next level, to kind of the forefront of the industry, kind of handling those supply chains and not getting distracted by other things beyond that to begin with, at least?
Well, you raise an interesting topic area of compliance, because, you know, that dovetails into the whole question around legality, compliance in this industry. And again, if you look at the material that's been put out by advocates for BSV, and particularly the Bitcoin Association for BSV, of which, you know, I sit on the executive committee there as well. It's all around ensuring that BSV operates within the law and is complementary to every aspect of transactional and legal compliance. And, you know, one of the roles that I hired in TAL, one of the first roles that we hired in TAL when we were setting up the office here in Switzerland, was a chief compliance officer, for that very reason. We wanted to ensure that as we develop the relationships with our clients, as we develop programs, as we develop transaction processing capabilities, that we are considering compliance and legal good governance at every step of the way.
And how much do you feel like BSV is an inherently superior protocol in terms of managing that?
Enormously. Simply put, I don't believe that BSV has any competitor existing today in this industry. And you know, people will listen to me say this, and then they'll come back, you know, with all sorts of counterclaims to that. I'm not saying that nothing else works. What I'm saying is that there are technologies out there that get talked about every day that can do things at certain levels and within certain parameters. But if you're looking at processing enterprise grade transactions at those volumes at low cost, BSV stands on its own. Now, I read forums and social media as much as everybody else, and I listen to, I read posts. This is going to the moon. That's going to the moon. Should I buy on the dip? Do this, do that, up, down. Pump and dump, all this sort of rubbish. And then I read developers posting, I built an application on X and it works, and I've got to a certain level now, but it's not viable anymore because the transaction fees are too high. Well, the transaction fees are too high because it doesn't scale. And this is the problem that Ethereum have had and still has. And, the solution to that has been coming for a long time now in the form of Ethereum 2.0. But from what I've heard and from what I understand, it's not going to fully solve the problem. But I do thank Ethereum. They created awareness around smart contracts and tokenization that everybody thought couldn't be fulfilled on Bitcoin. But of course, if you go back to the original protocol and you understand the original protocol, as we have done with BSV, you find that BSV can handle tokenization, smart contracts, it scales, and as it scales, the transaction fees become lower, not higher. And that's because it has no block limitations. So, industries grow and industries evolve, and other technologies within this sector have helped educate people. But over time, there will be a consolidation occur, and and this is why big business hasn't invested heavily in blockchain yet, because they look at it, they play with it, they do some R&D projects, they work with some private blockchain technology, but they can't get the sort of scalability and cost benefits that will cause them to be able to derive the sorts of outcomes that they would be looking for.
Is that because they're not fully invested in it enough? They're just
I think, well, it's not about being fully invested. It's about, involved some of these projects at the enterprise level. We're talking about multi-million-dollar investments in building applications that use the technology. So, you want to do pilots first. You do, proof of concepts, and so on and so forth, and then you hit the roadblock of scalability and cost, and it just doesn't become commercially feasible or viable to proceed. BSV changes all that, and Rena, I must say, over the last 2 or 3 months, I've had a number of people reach out and connect to me personally, asking, is it true that BSV can do or deliver certain throughput at certain costs? Can I introduce them to some people to talk to? And I'm talking about developers. So I'm starting to see quite a swell of interest at the developer level. Now, whether these developers are all associated with big companies or enterprise level businesses, I don't know. Some of them I know personally from previous lives, and they're working for mid-range companies, but they're starting to become aware of BSV. I mean, the media, generally speaking, hasn't been terribly kind to the BSV technology over the last few years. And when
Wow.
I say
That is
terribly kind, it can't refute it, but it doesn't cover it.
right. Okay. I think I feel like a lot of times media doesn't understand something and so doesn't know how to cover it in the right way and sometimes just refrains from covering it in much depth. Do you feel like that's part of the reason why?
Um, I think there are some. I mean, this industry is like no other I've ever seen. There are it's the polarized views on things are so extreme, and I, the media is factions of the media are closely aligned with some of these polarized views,
Hmm.
and I think that's part of the answer.
Hmm. Fair enough. The other thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, you mentioned the coming consolidation. I'd love to hear what TAL has going. I also want to ask you about, you mentioned, the recent procurement, the issuing shares. I'd love to hear you talk more about that and kind of where you see TAL in terms of, from a financial perspective, how big do you see it growing and kind of what's coming up in the next kind of year to 2 years?
Yeah, we're building the capital raise that we went out with recently was oversubscribed, and we had to make some adjustments to some of the requests. We couldn't accommodate everything that came in through subscription. We we have we had and have a program to develop our infrastructure this year. Um, our targets that we set in our forecasting and planning as to how we wanted our infrastructure to look, we've managed to essentially achieve that already. Now, that's not to say it's all in place, but it's to say that we have procured and we have the infrastructure plan that that I have high confidence that the goals that we set for 2021 will be met.
And what, yeah.
Yeah. Now, part of that is that we wanted to ensure as an organization that we were processing at least 30% of the blocks on the network. Because if we had a 30% um, uh, block processing um, percentage on the network, that would ensure that we can certainly deliver against contracts and SLAs for the foreseeable future. It also gives us a significant earning capability in terms of BSV tokens. So our plan for this year is to complete our infrastructure rollout, to accrue Bitcoin SV on our balance sheet to the maximum extent possible. And then we'll be starting our serious planning for what our infrastructure is going to look like in 2022, probably mid-year.
Got it. And in terms of, I wanted to ask you about the share price. I mean, I know like a good CEO isn't paying attention to the day-to-day fluctuations, and there's certainly been a lot of fluctuations, but it's been kind of a roller coaster of volatility. What do you point to that as, and kind of how do you see that if you're talking to investors this next year? Where do you see it going? How do you talk to them about the growth trajectory?
I think that we'll talk historically.
Okay.
Share price for all public companies that are operating in this space are in some way affected by movements in BTC price. So, we all benefited from rapid appreciation in BTC, but when you get $5,000-$10,000 corrections over the course of a 24-hour period, all share prices contract in line with that. We're a little bit different though, because we're not directly connected with BTC. We're connected with BSV, but all token prices tend to move in the same cycles in that crypto sector. I think that will change. There's no doubt that will change in coming years, and various prices of coins and companies will break away and find their own pattern. I think that once we get into the serious business of transaction processing over the coming couple of years, that will make that is recurring revenue that investors will value. The accumulation of BSV assets on our balance sheet will also significantly help the stability and future appreciation of our share price as well. And as enterprises start to invest more heavily in blockchain-based solutions, and they find their way to BSV, that will also contribute to not only a growth of the company, but a growth in our valuation.
And do you feel like when you look around at the marketplace and you see these stories of, companies starting to invest so much of their capital in Bitcoin and almost changing their business model to just become a Bitcoin holding company, does that encourage you?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that what we're seeing here is awareness translating into action and thoughts and planning and digital assets. I think it's a healthy thing.
And how much do you feel like, in terms of blockchain adoption, be it on the enterprise level as it develops more and more, what do you see that in terms of on a societal level in the coming kind of few years? How do you feel like it's going to look radically different in terms of how we're doing transactions?
Yeah, it definitely will. I mean, there are significant use cases in the area of social media and content management, and that will translate into the things that individuals do. Healthcare records is another example. Now, it's not to say that everybody's going to be sitting there with their mobile phone, their tablet, or their laptop talking about how they're interacting with the blockchain. They won't. The blockchain is going to be something in the background. So we're talking about business and application use cases here, as opposed to investing in digital currencies. I feel I'll go back to some of these comments. I could list off dozens of coins that people invest in, and the sort of rubbish they post. I invested $100 today. I'm going to buy my Lamborghini next month. My Lambo. We're going to the moon. Unfortunately, this is the sort of material that's trotted out and published for the gullible, who think that they can become a multi-millionaire overnight. Some people obviously invest and are lucky enough to invest in certain businesses and technology at the right time, and they do benefit from a very significant appreciation in prices. And call them lucky, call them insightful, call them being in the right place at the right time. It is whatever it is. But for every man and their dog out there to think that you've got to get into the crypto gold rush, and that's what it is. When you start talking about these coin prices, it's a gold rush. In fact, it's no different to going to the casino. Let's be honest. You go to the casino, you're better off betting on red and black on the roulette wheel. You probably get a better chance of a return than the investment of whatever hard-earned currency you got spare into some of these altcoins. But nonetheless, that's for people to decide. That's their money. That's their decision. I think regulators will have something to say about it in the future as well. They're there to protect people from their own
themselves
poor decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And well said. I feel like that's the difference between a trading mindset and an investment mindset. While trading can certainly make you money, and I think what you said is true. I think it's probably lucky visionaries, who are in the right place at the right time that have made this, crazy amounts of money in blockchain or in cannabis or in the internet or whatever it is that people have done. But for the most part, that's why I'm so happy to have you on the show and for Seeking Alpha to be doing what it's doing, which is bringing, I think, a broader discourse, a more in-depth discourse to the marketplace, because there are so many sound bites and headlines, and just buy any coin, Ethereum, Bitcoin, it doesn't matter, Ripple, just buy it. That's where the money is, but that's certainly not true.
I'll give you this thought. The mega corporations that we see today that have grown on the internet platform, there's probably 10 of them. They didn't exist in the early days of the internet, and they certainly didn't exist through the .com boom and bust. They grew on the back of a technology that was there after the bust. And at some stage, I believe there will be a correction. And I hope people don't take this as me saying that BTC is going to crash and burn, because I'm not. But there will be a correction in the industry, and there will be a consolidation and a sorting out of the valuable assets in the industry from those that are built on hot air, those that they have a business benefit, and those that don't. And after that occurs, we will see new industries, new corporations, new levels of investment that will result in, big companies that don't exist today.
And do you feel like?
Go
ahead.
No, where you go.
I was just going to say, do you feel like Tal is going to be the one to be acquiring those assets, or do you feel like Tal is going to be acquiring to a certain point and then bigger players are going to come in?
That's a hard question to answer. Is the mindset of Tal that at some stage in the future we will be looking at acquisitions? Absolutely. Is that something that we're rushing into? No. We've got to look after ensuring that our foundations and our strategies and our planning is solid first. We need to ensure that over the next 12 to 24 months that we deliver the capabilities that we know is going to form the foundation of where we think the future of blockchain technology is going to be 5 years from now. Now, in that period, there are definitely going to be opportunities that come across our desks that we will look at in terms of investment and possible merger or acquisition. But right now, that's not our focus. Our focus is ensuring that we're as strong and as healthy as we can be as a business, so that we're ready for those opportunities when they do present. Is Tal going to be building applications? No, that's not our business. Our business is the infrastructure to be able to deliver the services that these applications will need.
And I'm curious, when you were getting started, how surprised are you, or was it always a part of your makeup, your personality to be attracted to disruptive industries?
Wonderful question, actually. It is all my life, the things that I've done, I've been attracted to things that are yes, uh, disruptive and innovative because I find them exciting. I also find them not so easy. If I wanted a comfortable, easy life, I'd be playing golf uh, with some old mates. That's not what drives me. It's not what gets me out of bed. I've said for too many years now to too many people that I've worked with, if you're not doing something that causes you to jump out of bed of a morning and get stuck into it, then you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, my wife has said to me a couple of times in more recent years, "When are you going to stop work?" And I said, "Ain't going to happen." If I live to be, 75, I'll be working till I'm 75. If I live to be 95, I will be working till I'm 95. Um, and I am interested in longevity, and I do a lot of things with some very interesting doctors and clinics around longevity and management of aging in the body. So uh, I guess I'm destined and doomed to do this for a while yet.
Fair enough. Well, I'm just curious, what's the main thing that you've picked up from that kind of discussion around longevity?
Um, what I have picked up and what I do know with a great deal of certainty is that you can manage your life expectancy, and it's not just one. This is very similar to the get rich quick schemes on
Right,
digital assets. It's
right.
not just you can't just go and take one magic pill and say, there you go, that's the secret to a long life. It's a whole combination of things, and it varies depending on um, your DNA and uh, your sex and other things. But um, I work with 4 clinics, and I do a number of different things, and I've been doing it for 18 months to 2 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Stefan, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I think informative and insightful for many people, myself included. Before we go, I wanted to ask you, what's the best thing you've done as a CEO, and what's been the hardest thing or the hardest lesson for you to learn as a CEO?
Both those questions deal with people. Dealing with managing, working with, um, aligning uh, people is probably the most difficult thing. It's always going to be difficult because you're dealing with humans and different personalities and different motivating factors, et cetera, et cetera. So, understanding individuals and getting them to work together has been a challenge um, for as long as I can remember, and always will be. But it's something I enjoy. I like to think that I have been successful because I've got the ability to be able to get people to work together cohesively for a common goal.
Do you feel like one of the most salient aspects of being a CEO is building the team?
Yes,
Mm.
yeah. I can't do this on my own. I couldn't do this on my own. I wouldn't be able to get out of the gates doing this
Right.
on my own. I have to have a team, and I have to have good people around me.
Right.
And I have always been able to accumulate good people around me. I've done it for 30, 40 years. That's one of the things that I think comes reasonably naturally to me. And one of the best things that I've done, and it comes again naturally, and I haven't thought about it, but it was brought home to me in more recent times when I had a diversity policy put on my desk. And I went, "What's this?" It's diversity policy. But we do this already. We don't need a policy to tell us what to do. You know, if you look at my board of directors, if you look at my management team, and if you look at my management teams over the last 25 years, we've always had, I've always had a naturally instinctive attitude to diversity, and I think I'm proud of that.
As you
And
should be.
Tal's proud of that. I mean,
Yeah.
you just grab Google for 5 minutes and have a look at our executive team and our board. And we
Yeah.
didn't build our executive team and our board because I wanted to comply with a diversity policy. The diversity policy didn't exist. We just did it because it was the way we did things.
Absolutely. Always applaud diversity. And exactly what you're saying. It brings more thought and more voices to the table, which always gets the better idea, I think, out at the end of the day. I was going to ask you, and I don't know if that answered the question, but I was going to ask you if there's something that you look for. You say you like to hire people and you like to kind of engage in that way when hiring somebody. Do you feel like that there's something overall that you look for, or it's really just person to person in terms of what role you're trying to fill?
Well, there is something overall that I do look for.
Okay.
I it's amazed me over the years how many people hire their management teams or hire within their teams in their own image. They look in the mirror and they want to hire people like them, or they want to hire people who aren't as smart as they are. And what I look for is people who are smarter than me and who are there to challenge me in terms of their thinking. I said right at the very beginning, I alluded to the fact that I'm a person that makes my assessments of situations very quickly. I act on my instinct and my gut, and it's rarely wrong, but sometimes it is. And if I am then presented with information that causes me to change my mind, I will. And I will admit that I'm changing my mind. When I'm interviewing someone, the first 2 or 3 minutes of an interview, everybody does it. You go, this is the right person or this is not the right person. But then I spend the next hour validating or proving otherwise.
That's awesome.
And I will admit that I have had situations where in the first 2 minutes I've gone, this is the right person. An hour later I've gone, oh, I'm not so sure about this. And exactly the opposite. In the first 2 minutes gone, no. And then you sit there and you talk and you understand, and then at the end of it you go, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I've had some of my best hires come that way.
That's awesome. You sound like a very self-aware executive. I like it very much, in the ability to kind of change, that you're not so attached and entrenched in your position. I think that makes for a great leader.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my life playing competitive team sports, and I've for the most part either captain teams or coach teams, and so I'm a team sport person from very early age, and I think that has definitely had some impact on the way that I've gone about business. And I prefer to do things in a team environment than as a lone wolf. Sometimes circumstances present themselves, and you've got to act accordingly. But my preference is to do things in a team environment, and that's not to say that I have to do everything by consensus, because I don't. Um, but I am very cognizant of the impact on teams and team involvement, team participation in in things. So yes, if I have to make a call, I'll make a call, make a decision, and I'll explain it to the team and get their feedback on it. But at least they know why and how I came to that decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. Transparency key. Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Yeah.
Stefan, this has been, as I said, just a great conversation. I hope you'll come back down the road and we'll keep talking about blockchain and Tal, and you'll educate us and give us some new insights. But this was a great conversation today. So thank you again so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Rena. I hope I can come back, and I hope I can come back under circumstances where in time to come I'm proved right with some of the things I've said.
There you go. Well, that's what we like to continuing conversation is really interesting because of that. I think it is really interesting to see the arc and kind of the trajectory in between appearances. So yeah, I'm all for it. And even if it's not all right, I think it'll be good to catch up and see where we're at.
Well, even if I was wrong, you'll know that I'll admit that I was wrong.